Take it away, Michelle.
Thank you, Deborah. Hope all of you can hear me just fine. And you also can see my slide up on your screen. Also want to let you know that there's 4 handouts for this class, and they are located in the handout section, as you can see in the panel. And you won't really need them for this evening. They're mainly for later, but if you would like to take some notes, that would be a really good idea to have pencil or a paper and a pen. And also to let you know that this entire presentation is based on my experience teaching this class since about 2010, and I've been winter and spring sewing for about 15 years. So as Deborah mentioned in her handout, I'm a professional photographer and I run riedelphoto.com. And this time of year, it's not very busy, so I do a lot of teaching during the winter months. As you mentioned, my backyard is landscape for outdoor photography, and I just do a little bit of everything. So many of you are subscribers to Northern Gardener Magazine, and thank you so much for supporting the magazine and the Horticulture Society, and especially attending classes. And those of you now who have your magazine, there is an article on winter sewing in the magazine. Is sort of a how-to, so that will be a really good reference for you. In addition, the next issue, I have an article on pansies and violas, and that is going to be showing you how to grow both of those plants for 7 months, because pansies and violas can handle well below freezing temps. So look for that in the March-April issue. And then the May-June issue, I am in the process of writing. The photography, of course, is all done, about how to plant in drifts or groups and what plants do well massed together. So you'll have to take a look at that article. So as Deborah mentioned, the Star Tribune contest, I was one of 6 winners, and this is me in my backyard garden. In addition to teaching this class, and Deborah also mentioned that I do teach a lot of classes, I am teaching a spring class on container garden design, and it's through local school districts on April 12th from 7 o'clock to 8:30. So I have a bunch of school districts that are all coming together one night. It'll be a Zoom webinar, and if you have any questions about it, you can contact the Hort Society, or you could also contact me directly. I have my email at the end of the presentation. So I'd love to see you in that class. So here's what we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about what, why, and how to winter and spring sow, how to gather seeds, the supplies that you'll need, the containers, how to prep the containers or the mini greenhouse, and then we will get into spring germination, a little bit about condensation and watching the weather, when to open up your mini greenhouse, and then finally how to divide and transplant. And then we will finish off with question and answers. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what is winter sowing. This is an easy germination process that uses recyclables to create mini greenhouses. After adding soil and seeds, the greenhouses are placed outside in the winter and the spring months, and you wait patiently to see growth in the spring. So that's basically what it is. All right, so winter sowing is very, very easy compared to inside sowing. And mainly, it is a lot less expensive. You don't have to invest in grow lights or heating devices, peat pellets, and you also don't have to buy any expensive seed starting trays. And remember, you use recyclable containers, And therefore, your main expense is going to be seeds and soil. So this is really, really exciting for anybody who's on a very strict budget. You can grow your own plants very easily. So what is winter sowing? Oops, sorry, we already talked about that. I went the wrong way. So why would you want to winter sow? Growing hardy seedlings with this method is very inexpensive. Even people who live in limited space housing, like apartments and condos, will greatly benefit using this method. Nature controls the germination of winter sown seeds, so therefore plants are hardier than artificially forced indoor germination. And because the plants come into bloom at their own time, they are a lot more vigorous and healthier. It's also really great for the greenhouse to protect your seeds, and also when the plants start growing, it's also going to protect them from critters. So you don't have to worry when your plants are in the seedling stage, like you do in your garden, directly into your garden. You don't have to worry about rabbits and deer eating your plants because they will be completely protected. So I want to share with you a little bit about the difference between winter and spring sowing. The main website, wintersown.org, is mostly about winter and spring sowing, and we usually just hear it called winter sowing, but I like to also call it spring sowing because we're going to be doing both. And I'm going to show you how to do both this evening. So perennials, I know there's a lot of new gardeners attending this webinar. So perennials are the plants that come back every year, and those are the easiest to start. Perennials, you can start right now. You can start them in the month of January if you want. I personally start all of mine in February and March. I like to make sure that we get plenty of snow. We do have a lot of snow now, which is very unusual for January, but we get a lot more snow during the months of February and March. So I like to have snow completely covered around my containers. I also want to let you know that the one year I did all of my perennials during January, we didn't have very much snow, and it was incredibly cold, just a lot like this year. This January has been very, very cold, and we hit several days in our average annual low of -20 to -25 degrees. So that particular year, I just did not have as good of germination as I normally do. Should I blame it on the month of January? I'm not sure, but I just in general start February, March. A lot of people start in January, so you could easily start tomorrow if you'd like. And also, you can also start hardy annuals and also cold crop veggies during February and March if you'd like. And then one of your handouts does list the hardy annual. There's a list of some of the very popular hardy annuals that you can also start. And the reason why you can start some annuals right now is if you look at the bottom two photos, the one photo on the left is Amaranthus, and on the right is Cleome. Both of those are annuals, and annuals are plants that come that don't come back year after year. You have to start them. But these are plants in my garden that I had the previous year in my garden, and then the following spring, seeds had gotten stuck inside the mulch. Snow had completely covered them up, and they still came up in the area that I had them. So yes, you can definitely start hardy annuals this time of year. However, if you're not sure, just start your annuals in the spring. So I do all of my hardy annuals, my cold crop veggies, my warm season veggies, my warm season annuals, and my herbs. I usually start them about the very end of March into April. So if you want, you can just think that you start perennials during the cold months, January, February, March, and just start all of your annuals, veggies, and herbs in April. But it's completely up to you. If you're first year, you might want to follow that. If you're a very experienced gardener, you could definitely start hardy annuals and cold crop veggies during the colder months. And I do have one of the handouts was veggies. There is a list of cold crop veggies and warm season veggies or tropical vegetables that so do look at those handouts. They will be very, very helpful when deciding when to plant. So you can stop the 3rd or the 4th week of April because by then a lot of seeds can just be started directly into the ground. So I usually about April 22nd, I pretty much am done with all of my spring sowing, putting them into the recyclable containers, creating a mini greenhouse. But you do whatever you want. As I said, by then you can just direct sow them into the ground. So that's the difference between winter and spring sowing, and a lot of you probably might have some additional questions, so do fill them out in your chat box. So acquiring seeds, you can collect seeds from your garden. And I collect seed from my garden. Last year I did a lot of seed collecting. Usually it's done about 1 to 2 months after the plant is finished blooming, and you really want to make sure that the flower, the dried flower, is very, very dry and dark. That's what I usually go by. And when I do collect seeds, I also make sure that we haven't had rain recently. So I want to make sure everything is really, really dark and dry and dried out. You can also trade seeds with other experienced gardeners. There's a lot of experienced gardener seed trading in the Twin Cities. A lot of it happens in the fall and the winter months. And you can just do a search and look for trading seeds. I used to do a lot of it, and I haven't done it for a while because I collect all my own seeds, and I also purchase. And you can purchase them at a local nursery. A lot of the nurseries have their seeds, fresh 2022 seeds out. And then you can also mail order, which is something that Deborah and I talked about. As many of you were logging in this evening, I was telling her that I haven't done my seed mail ordering yet, but I plan to do that this coming week. So that's acquiring the seeds. So you really can't have a presentation on growing seeds outside without really talking about frost dates and hardiness zones. So I don't know if all of you know this, but the entire United States is separated into planting zones. It starts from zone 10, which is way down in Florida, and parts of Texas, and it goes all the way north up to we're one of the furthest northern parts. And the state of Minnesota is divided mostly between zones 3 and zones 4. And then of those, each zone is separated into zone A and B. So in the Twin Cities, which I am located, we are zone 4B, and that means that our average annual low temp is going to be -20 to -25 degrees. North of the Twin Cities is zone 4A, and that average annual low is -25 to -30. And many of us have already hit our average annual low. If you're up in northern Minnesota, you're in zone 3B, and the average annual temp is -30 to -35. And one of the reasons why knowing and understanding planting zones is very important when you're buying seeds, and also when you're buying plants. Take a look at the plant tag. It will say what zone we're in. So basically what it means is if you're living in the Twin Cities, for example, and you want to divide plants from your garden and transfer them to your cabin, let's say that's in Brainerd, and it is, Brainerd is in zone 3 and we're in zone 4, and you're going to transfer a zone 3 plant, a zone 4 plant, excuse me, it may not survive the winter up where your cabin is. So that's why it's really important. And here is some seed packs. This is what you'll want to always look at the back of a seed pack, just to make sure. Just because it says perennial on the front doesn't necessarily mean it's going to include your planting zone. So the back of this plant seeds for lupins, it's zone 4 through 7. So it's perfect for those of us living in the Twin Cities or just north of the Twin Cities. We will not have a problem growing lupins and getting them to come back year after year. The seed packet on the right is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosus. And as you see, the planting zone here is zone 3 through 10. That means that you can grow this throughout almost the entire United States, all the way up into northern part of Minnesota. Butterfly will make it through the winter, whether it's a warm winter or a cold winter. So whenever you're buying seeds, that's what you'll want to look for. Even when you are mail ordering, make sure that your planting zone is listed on the package. Okay, we are moving on to supplies needed to get started. First thing you want to start out with is containers, and I have a little asterisk next to it because I'm going to be showing you a little slide on that coming up. You'll want to start out with clean containers, especially like with the milk cartons. You want to make sure that they're rinsed out. I collect milk cartons from some of my neighbors who go through a lot of milk, and I ask them nicely to rinse them out. But when they arrive, you know, especially if kids have been poured the last glass of milk, sometimes they're a little on the smelly side. So I like to have them nicely rinsed out so that when I'm ready to get started, I can breathe well. Okay, and then where to find gallon-sized containers, because you can pretty much use anything that can handle, that you can put holes in, that can handle soil and water and seeds and has room to grow. That can be used for a mini greenhouse. My favorite is the milk cartons, and I'll be talking a little bit more about them coming up. If you're milk or gallon-sized milk or water containers. So if you don't have any and that's what you end up wanting to use, just try to find somebody that has a large family. Some businesses that have a water cooler, my neighbor has a business that has a water cooler, and they go through a lot of gallon-sized water containers, which are just perfect for this. You could also ask a business that uses milk, like a coffee shop, daycare, and just anybody that you know that's a milk lover. Collect early. You might even want to start collecting the year before. And then also, whenever you go to the grocery store, you could also purchase gallon distilled water containers. They only cost, last time I priced them, they were about 85 cents. Heavy duty scissors you will need, some duct tape, a sharp utility knife, or a drill will also work, inexpensive potting soil, plant labels and an exterior marker. What I do for my labels, I go to Menards and I buy some very, very cheap plastic mini blinds, and I just cut them up into about 4 to 6 inch pieces, and that's what I use. It's a mini, you can get a mini blind for about $6 to $7, and you can get a lot of plant tags out of one blind. And then also, you might be interested in keeping track of what you've got outside. I did this my first few years. I don't anymore. If you want to record the date, what you planted, what type of container it's in, and maybe even the number of containers. So that is entirely up to you. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about containers. I've got 3 slides that are based on the previous slide that I want to share with you. So here are some possible containers. There's many more. In the next slide, I'll even show you some more. So one of the reasons why I like the gallon size containers is if you can see the container that's holding cucumbers in this slide, is because they're very wide and they're tall enough for the plant to grow. So inside of this container, I have about 8 to 10 inches for the plant to grow, which is just perfect. The rotisserie chicken container works really well. I have green beans in there, and I'm going to be showing this particular photo again coming up. And you can see that, you know, the beans are only going to get about 3 inches, and then they're hitting the top, and they are done. The 3 containers in the back work really well. I think 2 of them were juice, and one was a pop container, Pepsi pop container. And those containers are nice, but the one thing I don't like about them is that they're very, very stiff containers. So trying to get a knife in the bottom is very difficult. I know some people will actually burn a hole in the bottom of them. You just have to be really, really careful. A drill will also work just fine. But one thing, the other reason why I really like the gallon size containers with the tops is that I can really see what's going on inside the top of the container, which is great. It's also really nice to be able to see when there's moisture collecting inside. And they're also a lot easier to water because I will take my hose attachment, put it on mist, and I'll be talking a little bit more about it, and I just put it right in the top of the container, and I give it a bunch of squirts, and this is in the springtime, that will just evenly distribute water. So they're my favorite container for many, many reasons. So moving on, talked about takeout containers work really well, bakery, produce, rotisserie chicken, soda bottles, the milk, distilled water, ice cream containers. If you are really big ice cream eaters, those also really work very well. There's just not going to be a whole lot of room for the plant to grow. And then this is also, the photo on the left is also a milk carton that's half gallon. So lots of options. I had an asterisk next to the duct tape. I do want to talk a little bit about duct tape. I have purchased really cheap duct tape before. I have noticed that it really, for the money, I got very little tape out of it. You can see this 3M all-weather tape is lots and lots of tape on it. So I can do like 30, maybe even 30 to 40 milk cartons with this one roll of duct tape. The other thing about buying cheap duct tape is that it doesn't weather well. I've had issues where when the weather is really cold, it doesn't stick, or if the weather gets too warm, it doesn't stick. So definitely invest in some really good quality duct tape, and it's nice to support local 3M. You'll also want to invest in some outdoor markers. I like to have plant labels. I'll be talking a little bit more about that, writing up plant labels that will actually go into your garden and into the ground, and especially if you're going to be sharing plants with other people, you want to make sure that you're able to see that plant label, the writing on it for many years to come. A Sharpie is only a one-season marker. So any of these garden markers will work, or an environmental marker will work really well. But these are 3 brands that I've used that have worked really well and have done really well in the weather, hot and cold. Okay, so now we are on to getting your containers prepped. So I'm using a milk carton as an example. mainly because they're very, very pliable plastic, as I mentioned, and it's just a lot safer. You can cut about 4 holes in the bottom. You can put them in the middle. You can put them along the side. The sides have a tendency to be a little bit more they're a little softer on the sides than it is in the middle. You could also, so about 4 1/2-inch holes on there. You can see that that one hole probably isn't quite big enough as the example, but that will work really great. Last year, my husband drilled about 2 1/2-inch holes for me, and I really liked that much better over putting in a knife and twisting it, because sometimes those holes can sort of grow back together. So you really want to make sure you have good drainage in the bottom of your container. So about 4 slits or about 2 1/2-inch holes will be just fine. And you can always add more holes later. I'm always adding, usually there might be a container or 2 or 3 that just might need a little bit more drainage come spring. So then you're going to take a scissors. This is why it's nice to have a heavy duty scissors, is to cut a horizontal line from one side of the handle to the other, and about 4 inches up from the bottom. You could do 3 inches up from the bottom, doesn't really matter. But then I want to make sure that I keep the top and the bottom connected. It's just a lot easier to tape up if they are connected. And then you just want to pull back the handle and, of course, keep it hinged. And then to prep the containers, you're going to want to fill it with about 3 inches of soil. So about 1 inch from the top of the cut line. If you're working with a rotisserie chicken container, you probably know that they're fairly shallow, about 2 inches tall. You might get about 1 3/4 inches of soil in them. That will work just fine also. But really, and you can also, if you're really on a budget, you could just put in a couple inches of soil. That works too. But I try to get in about 3 inches of soil. It just kind of depends. And at that point, after adding soil, you're going to want to water thoroughly. And if you can take a look at the photo, you can see that the container on the right is really, really drenched with water. You really want to make sure that water completely drains out. So it looks like the photo on the left, where it's just really, really nice, moist soil. Another thing that you can do, I have some friends that prefer this method. They prefer to take a big tub, put the soil in there, and then wet it in the tub. I prefer this method, add the soil and then add water. So just trying to think if there's anything else I want to tell you. Oh, and then, yeah, and if the water doesn't drain, if it still is kind of pooling on the top, add some more drainage holes. And you can just take your scissors and just kind of like snip the sides on the bottom. Okay, so I have some examples here. I'm going to show you about adding perennial seeds, annual and herb seeds, and then vegetable seeds to your containers, because they're a little bit different. So for anything that flowers, so that's perennials, my herbs, and my annuals, I am going to overseed. I'm going to sprinkle in as many seeds as possible. In the photo, you see a package of delphinium seeds. I'm going to put all of those into one container, and I'm just going to kind of like spread them out evenly. The coreopsis, all of those I will put into one container. If you don't want to follow this method, if you want to just put in just maybe make some rows and columns and not use all the seeds, you can certainly do that. But when you get to dividing, you will see that overseeding is the way to go. So in the photo on the left, I've collected Angelica gingas seeds from my garden, and I probably have 100 or more seeds into this one container. I want to put in as many as possible. And the other thing is, you also don't know what's going to germinate. not every seed germinates. So that's one of the reasons why for anything flowering, I like to overseed. Same with annuals and herbs. I'm going to sprinkle the seeds all over the container and just put in as many as I'd like. And then when it comes to the vegetables and large seeds, like the nasturtiums, the photo on the top right, you will want to, you can either press them right into the soil and cover them up, or just set them on top of the soil and then add more soil on top, which I will be getting to. So for the pumpkins, I think I put in, looks like I put in about 12 seeds. For the nasturtiums, I think there's about 20 seeds in there. Those are just larger seeds. For the beans down at the bottom, I think I did 9 seeds in a container. The peppers, I think I put in about, looks like about 16. And then I did some coriander seeds also, which are a little bit larger. So you can always thin out. For tomatoes, I will put 2 seeds together. I'll be talking about that coming up. I'll put 2 seeds together because I just want to make sure that not all of the seeds will germinate. So I want to make sure that I have at least one in the area that I'm going to plant it, at least one will grow. And if both seeds germinate, it's just fine. It's okay to have 2 plants together, or you can just weed or thin out if you feel like you have too many. I normally don't worry about it. I've even had 3 seeds together to make a tomato plant. It did just fine. So this is an example that I did last summer. I put green beans into, I told you I was going to show you this slide on the right again, into a rotisserie chicken container. And each plant was going to consist of 2 seeds or possibly 2 plants. And I think pretty much every seed germinated. You can probably see in the picture that you can kind of see like 2 plants really close together in the front there. That's the problem with the rotisserie chicken containers. It gives you maybe about 4 to 5 inches for the plants to grow. And you can see the green beans, they're almost all the way up to the top. So it's be nice to have a little extra space for them. So, and just hang on a second. I think there may be issues.
No,
some
we're all
people
good.
are saying fine. We're good. Okay, thank you very much.
Of course.
Okay, fabulous. Good. Okay. All right, so that's how to add the seeds. And then you will want to, if you didn't press the seeds down into the soil, you're going to want to cover up your seed with soil. And the directions are the dimension of, or the width or the length of the seed is about how much soil you're at on the top. So these are pumpkin seeds in this example. They're about 1/8 of an inch wide by 1/4 of an inch tall. You could put in 1/8 of an inch of soil, 1/4 of an inch of soil on top of them. It's not going to matter. For super, super tiny seeds, I just try to make sure I sprinkle enough soil on top. That tiny, tiny seed, if it has 1/4 of an inch of soil on top of it, it will still find its way to the top. It will, if it's healthy, it will find a way to make it past the soil. So, but that's the general directions. And then you'll want to add a label inside your container. You can see they've got cucumbers in this particular one. And then I will want to, since I want to make sure that the soil doesn't move, I'm just going to squirt with a little spritzer to really make sure that the seed is completely covered with water, with moist soil. That's very, very important to make sure it's completely covered. So the label that goes inside of the container, I like to have the full plant information on it. So I'll write whatever information I find in the back of the label. I want to know the name of the plant, the cultivar name, what kind of light it needs, how tall it's going to get, what colors it is. Because if I'm sharing plants with other people, I belong to a couple of garden clubs and we have plant sales. It's so much easier just to take that label and to duplicate it and write it onto my my plant label or my plant shade. And then that label will go into the ground with the plant, and that's the reason why I like to have an environmental marker to go with it. Okay, so the next thing is to take off the top, or you're going to push the top back together. So for anything that that you had hinged, you know, your pop bottles or your gallon-sized milk containers, this is where you're going to duct tape the top and the bottom together. And I like to cut at least for my milk containers, I like to cut about 2 12-inch pieces of duct tape. Because I can't work with one long piece of tape. It gets stuck to it itself, and I just end up wasting tape. So I have really, really good luck with 2 12-inch pieces of tape. And you actually have 2 handouts, one that I put together, one that I helped with the Hort Society put together with kind of an illustration how to. So it does list in there, at least on my handout, that I like to work with 2 12-inch pieces of duct tape, and smaller if it's more of a pop container. And so you're going to discard the cap. You do not need the cap on your pop containers or your milk containers. You will need to put the cover if it's like a popcorn container or ice cream container. You will need to keep the cover on that. But for the pop and the milk and the water, that is your drainage on the top. The label, I also like to label the outside. Sometimes I'll even put the date that I planted it, and then you're ready to go. So, and then I will be coming up in a slide coming up about the milk cartons. People always ask this question, can I use opaque milk cartons or do they have to be clear? So I'll be talking about that at the end. Okay, so for the takeout, the bakery, produce, ice cream, it's pretty much the same. You're going to poke holes in the bottom. You're going to fill it with soil. You're going to water and let it let the water drain out. I usually do this in my garage. Try to find a really fairly nice warm day. That's the other reason why I didn't start in January, is because I think we had just maybe a couple of really nice warm days to work on. I don't usually do this inside my house. I usually work in the garage on a table. I like to be up high so I'm not bending over. So you're gonna press these into the soil, you're gonna cover with soil, water again, able to add the label inside. And for like this takeout container, I'll just take my mini blind label and just drop it on its side. That works just great. I will label the top of the container, and then you're going to want to poke holes in the top of the container, usually with your knife. Some of these bakery or these bakery and takeout containers are very, very flimsy, so they're also not my favorite. And you can also see in this one that I only have about 3 inches of plant growth. There's not a lot of room in it, so it's not my favorite, but sometimes you just take what you can get. And so yeah, you do need to have holes in the top, because you have to remember you want snow and you want rain to reach the soil at all times. It's not necessary to tape these shut closed, because they're usually hinged, but sometimes the containers don't shut very well, especially if you've got some potting soil along the edge. And I do want to talk about, I forgot to talk about the potting soil. You saw that in that one photo. I had a bag of Miracle-Gro that works. You want potting soil or potting mix. You don't want to use topsoil, and I wouldn't recommend a garden soil. And Miracle-Gro isn't my favorite because it's very, very heavy with the peat. Peat moss in it, which is very, very drying. It just takes a long time for the water to kind of spill out the bottom because it's just very, very peat based. But whatever's on sale, that's what I'm usually buying. So your containers have seeds, soil, water inside. You've got the labeled outside. You've thrown your cap away. You've got label inside, all duct taped. And then the duct tape on these containers, many years ago, I was buying clear duct tape, also by 3M, and they don't make it anymore. So now I'm using the 3M environmental tape, which has replaced this. So it goes from inside your garage or your house to outside, and you can place them on the east, the south, or the west side of your house. You don't want to put them on the north side of the house unless you've got them out far enough so that sunshine is able to reach them and your house isn't shadowing them. You don't want to put them underneath a deck. You don't want to put them underneath an awning. You want water and snow to get to them, as you can see in my photos here. And you can place them in your garden, on your grass, on your patio. I have mine on my patio, on your deck, etc. Wherever you would like to place them, that's where they will be. For the winter months, you don't really have to worry too much about placement. For spring sowing, because things are going to like right now. Anything that you start during the month of February, even into March, seeds are just kind of in dormancy. They're getting cold. Many of the perennial seeds need a real good cold snap before they even will germinate. So they're just kind of sitting there in dormancy, waiting for the weather to warm up. And that weather warming up is when we usually start the spring sowing, which I talked a little bit about. So outside, you've got, let's just say it's mid to the end of April right now. Let's just say the end of April, because that's when you're really going to start seeing germination. If we have a really warm spring, you might even start to see your perennials germinating early April, but more than likely it's going to be about mid-April to end of April for the perennials, and usually about mid to the end of April, even into early May for your annuals, your vegetables, and your herbs. So it just depends upon when you start them. You have to be really careful about starting too early, because if you have plants that, and I'll be talking a little bit more about frost, if you have plants, if we get warm up way too much and germination starts really soon, like maybe even early April, because maybe you started your annuals at the end of March, which you can do for some of the cold and hardy ones, they start to germinate, and then we start getting some blasted with some super cold temps. How are those seedlings going to survive? So your perennials will be fine, and I'll be talking a little bit more about this. It's the annuals, veggies, and the herbs that you have to be a little bit careful for. So, okay, so germination's starting, and let's say you have a container and it is mid-May and you still have nothing going on inside. It's probably not going to germinate at all. So what I'll usually do is I'll just recycle the soil and then recycle the container. So if you have something that didn't germinate or just didn't germinate very well, maybe just half of the seeds germinated, it could be that maybe you collected seeds and you planted the wrong, you collected seed from the wrong part of the plant. I've done that before, believe me. It's very frustrating. Or maybe you planted too early. Maybe that seed head hadn't dried out enough for it to go to seed. That can happen. You can buy brand new seeds locally. You can even mail order them. They could just be bad seeds. Or maybe you put the seed way too deep or way too shallow. That's one thing about making sure that you're very, very gentle with the soil that's on top, because like even with torrential rains, it can move the soil around and expose the seeds, or you can have too many seeds all kind of grouped together. So also not enough drainage. You could have completely waterlogged the soil and killed those seedlings. Or maybe not enough or too much water. too little light, not enough sunlight for the seeds to start germinate. Or it could just be me. I could have just somewhere along the line made an error. But for the most part, you should be able to get to this germination stage if you followed all of the instructions. Okay, so spring has arrived. Weather's starting to warm up. Plants know when it's safe to come up. It's just sort of part of their genetics. They're going to wait for the soil to really warm up. That's one thing great about starting tomatoes and peppers, which are the tropical vegetables, is that you can't really start them in your garden until your soil really warms up. But that's one thing great about getting them started in these mini greenhouses. We're going to keep them nice and warm and very much protected. So as seedlings start to grow, you can, if you want, uncover, take off your tape and uncover them. I know a lot of people do this. I rarely do this. I like to keep my containers covered and keep the seedlings in there as warm as possible, because it's a hassle to be opening them up and closing them, opening them up in the morning, closing them at night, opening, closing. I don't want to have to deal with that. So, but when we get temperatures that are really warm, it can get really super hot in the containers, which isn't going to hurt the plants. I've actually put a thermometer inside, and it's been over 100 degrees in some of my containers. As long as the soil is moist, you will be fine. But you might want to move your containers if it's a really warm spring April day and we're getting maybe up to 80 degrees. That would be kind of unusual, but can happen. You might want to take your containers and move them so that they're just getting maybe morning up to early afternoon sun. And even into May, if we've got super hot temps, or not super hot temps, but just very warm, unusually warm weather, you might want to just have your containers not getting all day sun. On the flip side, if we have really cold weather in April and your seedlings are growing, and let's say it's all day long, the temp's going to be in the 30s, you can make sure that your containers are going to be getting all day sun, not a drop of shade, to keep them really warm and very happy so that they can get through the cool evening. So that's what I will do, is I will actually move my containers around if I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the forecast. So if it's really cold, you can, I'll be talking a little bit more about what to do when it gets really cold coming up. So normally during the cold weather months, you won't have to water them. You may not even have to water during the month of April, because that's our real rainy season. But we have had, as I said, I've done this for over 15 years. I have had Aprils that have been a little on the dry side, and I have had to go out and water. So I love it when my hose is all hooked up and ready to go. I'll just put my attachment on mist, and I will hold it right on top of my containers and mist the inside. For those of you who have holes punched in the top of maybe a takeout container, you just really need to make sure. That's one of the reasons why I don't really like those containers, is I can't make sure that I have water reaching all of my seedlings. So that's one thing nice, or that's one of the reasons why it's nice to open them up and then close them. But it's just a big step. Usually by about mid-May, when we're done having frost, and I forgot to mention on one of my previous slides, I mentioned, I think it was the one with the state of Minnesota on it, I forgot to mention that our last average frost is usually about early May. So that's one of the reasons why I like to keep my containers covered, is because if we do hit some frosty temps, I've got my plants nicely protected. So We can usually completely remove the cover, usually about early to mid-May, but you're going to really need to make sure that you watch your weather forecast to make sure that we're not going to have cold, frosty temps in the evening. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that coming up. So condensation. For the best sign that your seedlings have plenty of moisture is condensation. That is a really good sign. When you go out, you probably, like me, I have all of my containers in one large area. That's all I want to see is I want to make sure I can see the condensation. If I don't have condensation, that means I need to water. And then you want to make sure that you water evenly. And the year I had these bakery takeout, rotisserie chicken containers, it was just really a kind of a pain to water them because I had to pretty much open up the containers. And you can see that one bakery container here, you can see the plant is already squished right up against the top. So not ideal, but it still works. Okay, and again, I like to, I love watering the water in the pop and the milk containers because they're just so much easier. Just kind of putting my head on my hose attachment right on top on mist and give it a bunch of squirts, and it just like a shower head, it just evenly mists and everything gets nicely soaked with water. Okay, condensation, a good thing, a must if you're going to have the cover on. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what to do if it's below freezing. For your perennials, they are going to be just fine. They will be, if you've got seedlings growing, they will be okay. If you are uncomfortable leaving them out, or maybe we're dipping into about 28, 25 degrees, go ahead, bring them into your garage or your house for the night, or probably just in the garage for the perennials. They really like to, they like the cold and the warmth and switching between the two. Below freezing temps may not be okay for your tender seedlings. They're okay for your cold crop veggies. They're going to be okay for some of your annuals, but when in doubt, you might want to move your containers indoors, move them into your garage, or cover them up with a blanket or a sheet. At this time of year, you're really playing a game of chance. And that is just the hardest part when we get too warm and we get too cold. It's very difficult to manage all of your plants. But I do it. I usually have over 70 containers out because I'm growing everything in them. And it's just something that really needs, it's really going to require your time. And you're going to be wanting to check them first thing in the morning. You're going to want to check them a couple times during the day, making sure that they're getting lots and lots of sun, or maybe just morning sun, or maybe just moved into the garage. If we have a day that is, and this has happened to me a few times, where it's been highs in the low 30s and not a drop of sun, you could just leave them in your garage for a couple nights. It's not going to hurt them, just to kind of keep them protected. So when in doubt, protect. So one thing that I do is I have this garden cart that holds about 32 milk cartons, and it's just really been nice to, I have my perennials in there because this was like at the end of March. I hadn't quite started because you can still see some snow on my patio. I hadn't started my my annuals, veggies, and herbs yet. And once those started, the perennials that were in my garden cart, they got moved down to the patio. But anything that I know is going to be tender, like, for example, my tomatoes and my peppers, I'm going to put in this garden cart because I'm going to really want to move. Those are plants that I'm going to want to move around. But I can fit 32 in here. I can even put some on top. Now they're a little bit, they're not going to sit really flat, but they will be fine. So during the entire springtime, or once your plants start germinating, you are going to want to watch your weather. You're going to want to watch TV or get apps up on your phones to make sure that you know what the temperature, the high temp for the day is and the low temp. If we're average, you're going to be fine. If we're too warm, you might need to do something. If we're going to be too cold, you might need to do something different. So moving your containers around. But very, very important to watch the weather. And you also have to watch for frost. As I said, our average frost is usually early May, but we have had frost mid-May, which is why I'm keeping my covers on my containers for as long as I possibly can. So when to open them? Usually by Memorial Day, they can all be opened. If something's a little slow starting, you can just keep the cover on, whatever you would like to do. When you start seeing plants come out the top, yes, it's definitely ready to open them up. And it's just a matter of just like peeling back the duct tape and then taking your scissors and snipping the handles so that they're completely open. And then the one thing about having them open like this is fabulous bunny food if they're just sitting on your patio. I mean, they love little tiny little seedlings like what you see in the picture on the lower right. So do make sure that maybe you've got them protected. Like I will put some like larger pots around mine that are open so that they can't get to them. Or I might even set up some tables and put them up on top, or I might put them up against the house, maybe on my stoop, making sure that they are going to get plenty of sun. But it's they're just, once you open them up, they're a lot easier to take care of. But again, you just need you can certainly open them up early May if you want. Especially if you really don't see any cold temps in, you know, the next week or week and 10-day forecast. But again, you've got critter problems once you open them up. I wanted to share with you some successful perennial germination. This was quite a few years ago. I lined up some of the perennials that I grew, not all of them. Germinated really well, as you can see. Some of them need a little bit more time. This was early May when I took this photo. So I had really good success. And again, another year of perennial germination success. You can see lots and lots of overseeding, which will really important coming up when we start dividing. And I apologize to any of you who only allowed an hour for this class. I don't know what happened, but it was supposed to be, I think, an hour and 15 minutes to maybe even an hour and a half with Q&A. So I'm going to go over a little bit, but this is being recorded if you do have to leave, so I apologize. So. And then veggie, whoops, I'm so sorry. Veggie germination success. This was, I think this was was this last year? I don't remember if this was last year or not. No, I think the next slide was last year. I've got watermelon growing in here. I'm going to use my little cursor here. I think this, I'm not quite sure what that is. I can't quite see, but I've just got kind of a good assortment of different things. I've got, these are my tomatoes. This is early May. Just tomatoes are doing pretty good. They're pretty tall. I can't quite, oh, this is zucchini right here, lettuce. And then this was photographed on May 8th. And some more perennial success. You can see some sweet corn growing here and here, lettuce here, some beans right over here. So a little bit of everything. So this was photographed on May 8th. So this was a really nice, perfect warm spring. And then here's some annual and herb germination success. And here's a good example of, I'm gonna get my cursor going here, of torrential rains making a little pathway inside my containers. I know I seeded evenly, but that's what happens sometimes. But it works fine. It's good. So I mentioned clear versus opaque containers, both work. This one year I planted the same plant on the exact same day in a clear and an opaque container. You can see that they both grew at the same rate. And this was photographed, I think, like early June. And I already had, my alyssum was already starting to bloom. You're also going to notice that you will find weeds. Weeds come in the soil, and especially if you've opened up your container, weed seeds can get down through the containers and will start growing, but more than likely it probably came in from came in with your soil. And you just really need to make sure that you keep an eye on everything, because like here's a weed here and a weed here. Really need to look through your seedlings and just see if there's something different. This coreopsis here has an obvious weed in it, and then in this poppy you can see that this is the weed here. Okay, so transplanting. Transplantings are really fun and easy, especially if you have overseeded. Whoops, I'm very sorry. Did not mean to advance that slide. So most of the time I will start to transplant usually about, if we've been really warm, sometimes even the end of April, but more than likely like the first week of May is usually when I'm starting to transplant. And I will transplant all the way into June, especially if something's just really slow or we've had just an incredibly cool spring, which I just hate. I love having warm, or I love having average spring temperatures. So when to transplant? You want to wait until you have a really strong root system. Now, if I had taken this Angelica and I had only put in 1 seed per plant, it would be probably into July before I'd even be able to transplant, or maybe even like when summer starts. But having a big clump, it's called like a hunk of seedlings, to form one plant is the key to success. So what I'll do is I'll cut the, when I know, a lot of times that's one thing nice about having the clear plastic containers, I can kind of see the roots along the edges of the clear containers. I can see how much roots are there. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut all 4 sides. Sometimes if I'm really having a hard time getting the plants out, I might add a cut in between, so 8 cuts instead of 4. And then I will take it out. You can see the photo on the very top. That was just last early April. This is lupins, and a beautiful, beautiful perennial. You can see I've got 3 inches of soil there. I love it when I dig down in there and into my milk carton, and I can just pull it up and it is all one compact, like one plant. It's just so much easier to divide. And you just divide into as many plants as you need. This Angelica gingas, for example, I divided it into 9 plants, as you can see before. You can transplant them into a larger pot, which is what I like to do, because then I set up shelves up against my house on the east side of my house. And it gets morning and up until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon sun, and I just let them sit there and I let them grow in these little pots, and then I share them and I give them to the plant sales that I'm donating to. But you can also put them directly into the ground if you'd like. I want to make sure that plant gets a little bit larger and taller so that if the bunny decides to come in and nibble, I still have plenty of plant left. I don't have to worry about losing that particular plant. So here is kind of a step-by-step. This is a plant called Lychnis orange gnome. It's a perennial plant. This is also from last year. I love the fact that I took it out. It was very nice and root bound, and I just took little pieces of it and just slowly broke it apart, and voila, final plant that I put into the pot. So that's basically how you transplant. The veggies are really easy to transplant because their roots grow really fast and very deep, unlike some of the flowering plants. So that's why I like to overseed. And then I want to share with you just one kind of fun example that I took last year. So I grew several containers of Columbine Blue Star, which is a beautiful blue and white perennial plant that blooms in spring. And I took a piece of it, a chunk of it from another container, and that's when I put that in this 3-inch pot. And then I went into my garden and I took the Columbine Blue Star that I grew the previous year in 2020. So this photography was done in 2021, probably around, I want to say like end of May, and I dug that out and put it in a pot so you can see what it looks like. A plant that is a whole bunch of seedlings magically is just one plant. It just knows how to turn itself into one plant. And this is what it looked like at the end of 2020 in the fall. It looked just like this. And then it died back, and then I dug it out and put it in a larger pot because I was giving it away to somebody. So that is it on transplanting. Again, into pots or into the ground. I'm really all about putting into smaller pots, just because it works really well for me. So I wanted to just take you on a really quick garden tour before I answer questions. One of the reasons why I started winter and spring sowing is we decided to re-landscape the front yard. It was a hill that was very, very steep, and we put in this long boulder wall and added edging. And this side was all going to be all grass, but this whole humongous area, it even dipped here and it even went back behind the spruce tree. This whole area I needed to fill with plants, and I was trying to find a way to do it inexpensive or cheap. And well, not cheap. I hate saying the word cheap, but just I didn't want to spend a lot of money, and I didn't want to have to buy a whole lot of plants because it's a huge area to fill in. So that's how I got started in winter sowing. Is I did a lot of different types of perennials that year, and I've had to like thin it out a little bit. But about 5 years later, this is actually, I think it was about even 3 years later, and I think this was 5 years later. Never mind. Sorry. 5 years later, this is what it looked like. It's really nice and filled out. And then these are just some annuals that I started or purchased in front of my mailbox. So this is the front of my yard, and then this is my backyard. Again, a lot of plants in my garden that I winter and spring sowed. And I do have a pond and a waterfall. And as Deborah mentioned in the beginning, I do a lot of garden tours. I am on a couple tours this coming summer. So I am happy to answer any and all of your questions. I've got my email down on the bottom if you want to email me. I don't mind answering questions. I do want to say, I want to point out I want to point out one very important website. wintersown.org is where this whole phenomenon started. She is from New York, which is a different planting zone. So be careful when she talks about, okay, the month of March, you can open all your containers up. Well, no, you don't want to do that because, you know, she's out east in a much warmer zone. I think she's in zone 6. And then if any of you are on Facebook, you might want to join Twin Cities Winter Sowers. It's a great, wonderful group of people who are beginners and people who are advanced in sowing, and that is a great place to ask questions. Okay, I'm ready, Deborah.
Okay.
Are there a lot?
Oh yeah. Now, Michelle, I know that you already covered this, but a lot of people asked anyway, so I'm going to ask you again. Is it okay to use half-gallon milk cartons, or are they too small?
They are not too small. A friend of mine, she that's what she uses, our half-gallon. She even does like the quart size ones, and she treats them as like the quart size one. She treats that as like one plant. You know, she'll overseed, but she'll treat that as one plant. And then for the half-gallon, yes, you know, you might want to just separate it into maybe like 4 plants or whatever you'd like to do. But yes, anything, basically anything that can hold soil seeds. You can put holes in the bottom, holes in the top, and there's room for the plant to grow, will work. Anything will work. Be creative. Okay.
Okay.
Next.
And along with that, we know that you said that that opaque containers were fine, but what about opaque containers with opaque lids? Like, for example, the 2-gallon buckets of kitty litter, which are great because they have handles inherent to them.
Yeah,
so you can move them
I don't,
easily, but
I'm not sure. I want to say no, but I also want to add I'm not sure. Now, one thing nice is that, you know, with the opaque containers, that you are getting sunlight in there because you've got that cap that you've removed. So yeah, I want to say no, but experiment. Your first year, it's all about experimenting, and if it works, send me an email or contact the Hort Society. They'll let me know. I want to know if it works. It's a fabulous question. I don't have a definite answer for. Okay, ready.
Okay. What, please, is the difference between hardy annuals and cold hardy annuals? Are reseeders the test, or is there really a difference? Help us out here.
Well, there is a difference. There are some annuals that that cannot handle cold temps, and you do have a hardy annual handout. And the difference is a hardy annual you can kind of treat like a perennial. You could start them now. The seeds can handle cold temps. The problem is, can the plant handle the cold temps? That's the big question. Perennial plants, that's where it gets really tricky in the spring. So you also, so those of you who are beginners, you might want to make sure you put an annual or maybe put an A and a P on the outside of your container so that you know the difference. But you do have this long list of hardy annuals that you could start now if you want. And as I said, if you're in doubt, just treat all the hardy annuals as annuals and start them in April and protect them if we get too cold. Okay, I hope. Did that answer the question, do you think, Deborah?
I think so. This is your helpful reminder that there are 4 handouts on. If you go to the webinar control panel, look under handouts. There are 4 of them you can download. Very important.
Yes, they will be so helpful for you. As a matter of fact, almost everything well, not everything I've talked about, but most of what I've talked about tonight is on there.
Okay, next question. Are there any ornamental grasses you would recommend for winter sowing?
I have winter sowed blue fescue and had very good luck with that. I have done a couple other grasses and I can't think of the names of them. One was a miscanthus and I can't think of the other one. And yes, they also winter sow very well. Yes,
they also asked specifically about bunny tail grass. I think so. That's one with a little poof on it.
Yes, yeah, that's a darling little grass. If you can find seeds for that, definitely grow it.
Okay.
I love that bunny.
It's so cute. It's really cute. Questions about planting natives this way. Will this process work for those seeds that need to be cold stratified?
Yes, because you are going to start them in February and March. And even if you wait till the end of March, we still get cold temps in April. And they will be just fine. You can start all of your native plants, native perennial plants, starting from now through the end of March. But I do want to tell you that I did an experiment one year because I found a package of milkweed that needed the seed needed to be cold stratified. And I thought, you know, I know that the month of April we do get some cold temps, and it doesn't have to be a long stretch of cold temps. It just needs, we need to have some cold temps at night, which we will during the month of April. So the first week of April, I decided to plant them, and they germinated just fine. So there you go. But
nice.
In general, definitely get everything done February, and by the end, usually by the third week of March, I kind of like to be done. So, and even if we get some 60-degree temps in March, don't worry, you'll be fine.
Okay.
You'll be fine. Yeah.
Do you have to worry about jumping worms with seed exchanges?
No. No.
Okay.
That is they're just in the soil. You do have to worry about jumping worms. You're getting potted plants.
If you're using a container with a wider top, like an ice cream bucket, do you do anything to make the top smaller? Would you, for example, suggest cutting a little hole in the middle of the top?
That would work fabulous. Yes. One hole in the, like maybe a 1-inch hole in the top would be just perfect, instead of, like several smaller holes, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Okay. That would be just fine. I also wanted to say about the milk cartons, and I forgot to mention this, is that I love, because that's pretty much all I'm going to do this year. I love standing over the top of them and being able to see inside. When you've got condensation inside, like the rotisserie containers, you can't really tell if there's anything growing inside. You can see everything inside, looking over the top, and it's just so nice and so exciting to see that first seedling is just a joy. I want to jump up and down. So,
what is your take on seed starting soil or seed starting mix?
It's expensive, and it's not necessary for this process. You can use it, but I would save it for indoor. I would save it for indoor, and I would go cheap on your soil and just get whatever you can find on sale at wherever you shop. I shop at Menards. And then some of the soil will be frozen. Some of it will be kept outside, some of it will be kept inside. So you just need to make sure that you allow enough time. You might need to bring it inside for it to thaw out before you start. I've done that 1 year. I've got all ready. I had everything cut. I had labels done. I went out to the garage, and it was still frozen. It's like, darn, and it was such a nice warm day. So.
By the way, Megan suggests either cost-friendly or cost-effective if you don't want to say cheap.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Very good.
Get all the interesting things.
Cost-effective. Love it. I'm a word person, so thank you.
Catherine wants to know, we'll be gone from mid-March to mid-April. Will it be possible to create our planters in March before we leave and leave them outside unattended until we return in mid-April?
Oh, if we have normal weather, yes. I think you will be okay. But if we have if we get warm and have a period of dry and they dry out, I think the seeds will probably be fine. But if we start growing seedlings and your soil dries out, might be a problem. If you can, you might want to have somebody maybe check on them for you. That would be just really lovely. If you've got a neighbor that owes you a favor, that would be nice if you could do that. But you should be okay. You should be okay. just go ahead and try it. I mean, you're out of seeds and you're out of soil. At least you know, at least you tried it. I'm all about experimenting.
Okay. Do you test the seeds for germination before you use them?
You do not need to, but you can if you want. I never do anymore. I don't. I'm collecting seeds and I'm buying seeds, so I don't bother with that process.
Okay.
But you can if you want.
Joanna says, I've already started some native perennial seeds and I'm realizing I didn't water them as much as you recommend. Would you suggest trying to fix that even though they're already frozen?
It depends what kind of container she's using. If she used a milk or water container, all she has to do is just take a peek inside and just see if you know, if there's a lot of snow, if there's snow inside, she should be okay. But it would be really nice to have had that seed start with really moist soil around it. I don't know if she could add water. I mean, the soil's frozen. If you want to add some water, you could, especially on a nice warm day. I wouldn't do it on a cold day, just because I don't want to be out on a cold day like today. But yeah, if you want, you could add some more soil. It's really, really nice to start that seed out with some really nice trench soil. But snow, you could even add snow inside too if you want. Add lots of snow inside.
Critter question. Rabbits and squirrels. Rabbits, once you remove the covers, if you put them, for example, on a table, theoretically that would help with the rabbits. What about squirrels?
I've never had any issues with squirrels. Even when they've been down on my patio, I haven't had issues with them. I know some people who have had issues, but I don't know, maybe here in Oakdale, I have cooperative squirrels, but yeah, and if squirrels are digging in them, you're definitely going to want to move them out of the way. So that's why I set up tables. And yeah, I know they can still jump up on the tables, but I don't know what to tell you. It's a
Do
tough
you
one.
save and reuse your containers? And if not, why not?
Oh, it's a great question. I know a lot of people who do, and they swear by it. But but the people who do that, mostly it's because they had a hard time getting containers, so they want to reuse them year after year. I like to start fresh. And I rinse them out and I put them in my recycling. I don't have any problems getting new ones. I also, you're going to want to make sure that you cross off last year's and put on this year's, and they're just a lot easier to work with when it's hinged. And then otherwise you have to try to match up what cover went with what, because if you're using different brands of milk, sometimes they don't line up just perfectly. So that's one of the reasons why I don't do it. Plus, as I said, I have easy access to containers. But if you don't have easy access and you want to reuse them year after year, yes, absolutely you can. Very good question. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Do you have problems with dampening off with all of the condensation?
No, you don't have to worry too much about dampening off. The condensation is something that has to occur. The soil needs to be evenly moist, but it cannot be saturated, which is why you need to be out there. That's why when I love the milk cartons, because all I have to do is just peer over. I don't have to get down on my hands and knees. I don't have to open it up. And I want to make sure that the soil is draining out, as I mentioned before. If there's too much water in it, just taking my scissors, I don't know if you can see this, but just cutting little holes along the edges of my containers. You don't have to worry about dampening off process, because this is more of a hardy way to grow seeds versus inside artificially grown plants. They're already hardened off. They'll be outside. get in the cold, get in the warmth? It's a good question.
Hey, can you plant grains this way? Have you planted grain? Corn, barley, rye. Have you tried it?
I've only planted corn. I haven't planted any other grains, and corn worked just fine. As a matter of fact, I think I showed you some corn seedlings. They were about 4 inches tall in the example that I showed when I showed you the veggies growing, but I have not. I don't see any reason why you could not start grains this way.
Okay. Can you do this on a balcony?
Yes.
Right? How about with pansies? Are they going to have to wait for the article?
Yes, I have, yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, if you can find pansy seed, you can start this with pansies. And that's something that you could start now, because I'm pretty sure that, let me just see if pansies are on. I don't see them on the hardy annual list. They probably should be on there. But yes, I have grown pansies.
Okay. What do I do if the plant grows too tall and are bending, but it's still too cold to take off the lid?
That's a wonderful question. You probably will have to bring it inside.
Okay. Do
Because
you
I
know? Oh,
any
sorry.
you could bring it outside. You could open it up and bring it outside during the day, but bring it in at night. That's what I would do.
Okay.
And that's what I've had to do with some of my containers, as I showed you the bakery container that didn't have like any kind of a dome for the top, and the seedlings scrunched up right against the top. That's what I've had to do, is open it up, and if it's still, early May and we're going to get too cold down into the 30s, I brought it inside, and so I just brought it back and forth, inside, outside.
Do you know anyone in Zone 4 that has successfully done this with gallon freezer bags? I suppose
I don't
that's a
know.
way to get around the whole you can't see inside.
Right. Yeah. I don't see why it wouldn't work. And if you're on Facebook, you could join the Twin Cities Winter Sowers. There's a lot of people on that. I'm sure somebody's tried it, because it's clear. You need some holes in it, in the bag. I don't know how you're going to keep it up, so that it's room for the plant to grow. What you can put inside to keep, some kind of a area for the plant to grow, but I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Okay, let me just comb through a few more of these. Are fungus gnats an issue?
They are, but they don't ruin anything. They're not going to ruin the plants, especially when you start opening up your containers. There's going to be all kinds of, they're going to be flying around. They'll head to other plants. But I have seen them in my milk cartons with seedlings growing, and they don't hurt them at all. And I've never even had to spray for them. It's just a natural occurring
Nice.
process. And, something will come along and want to eat them.
Are there
Spider.
any Are there any flowers you absolutely would not grow like this? Like hollyhocks or foxgloves because they get really tall really fast? Or
No. Well, I think the one plant that gets tall really fast are sunflowers. So like my first year, I grew sunflowers. Oh, wow. They germinated in a week. And so, and I was growing like the ones that get to like 8-10 feet tall. So of course they're going to grow faster than the ones that get, more in like 2 to 3 feet tall range. What I learned from that is that I will start them at the end of April, early May. So that they just, yeah, because there are, and this is all an experiment. You're going to say to yourself, well, darn, next year when I grow this, I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to do something else or whatever. So, but then for something like that, maybe I might want to start them in like a pop container. So there's even more space than the milk carton for the plant to grow.
Have you had any trouble with plants that have big tap roots?
No, I haven't, because they're usually divided before they get a long taproot. And I have tried this with root vegetables, even though I think on my handout, I think I say that root vegetables should be sown directly into the ground. I have done this method with carrots and radishes and beets, and it worked just fine. No problems whatsoever. Because basically the purpose of this is to grow, you're trying to grow roots and you're trying to grow seedlings. And when carrots are in the seedling stage, that's all it is. It's just kind of roots and leaves, and you don't really get it doesn't really get the meat of the vegetable until it gets bigger, and by that time it's in the ground.
What about peas?
Peas,
what about them? You always read that you shouldn't transplant them. You don't see them sold so much. Is that way? Just put them in anyway.
As I said, don't worry about transplanting. You're starting. This method is to start growing roots and to start growing leaves. So peas will be just fine. I haven't had no problems transplanting them. So I'm even transplanting them from my milk carton into the 3-inch pot and then into the garden. They're fine.
Okay. All right, folks, I'm going to have to ask you to stop sending in questions because they're still doing it. But we are at past 8 o'clock at this point. So I'm afraid questions are closed. We have a few more to answer, but I'm going to have to ask you all to stop. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I'm getting sent emojis with tears down the side.
This method of starting seeds, there are so many questions along the way. So many questions along the way. And that's one thing nice about getting in on, if you're on Facebook, getting in this Twin Cities Winter Sowers, you have someone to help answer your questions. And you also have my email too. You can go ahead and email me. I don't mind at all helping.
So what are your considerations for winter sowing versus direct sowing?
I have a problem with rabbits in my garden, so I winter spring sow everything. Because what I will do is I don't plant my veggie garden until mid-June. So I've gone from the milk carton into my 3-inch pot. Everything in my veggie garden goes into 3-inch pot. I wait for it to get bigger and better, and then I transplant it in the ground. And by then, things are more mature. I don't have to worry about a bunny eating a little seedling. Plant's gone versus a plant that's 3, 4, 5 inches tall. By the time mid-June comes around, my tomato plants are already 6 inches tall, or even bigger, probably even taller than that. Probably more into the 8-inch tall range. So, but it also depends upon what kind of weather we've had during the month of May and June. So, yeah, that's the reason why a lot of people think I put too much work into the veggie growing, but I really want to make sure that I know it's germinated. I know it's going to be a plant because I have my veggie garden all worked out. I know exactly how many plants of whatever I need and want, and I control that with spring and winter sowing.
Okay. Do you water and then let the containers drain well before putting them outside? Or do you water them and then put them outside and let them drain out there?
That's a good question. I make sure they drain before I even add the seeds. So the water ones drain out before I put in the seeds, then I put the seeds, then I put more soil on top of the seeds, and that's the soil that I spritz. So by that time, it's already, all that water is already drained out. And you'll figure out how much water you want to, how much water your container can actually hold before even, because if it's just gushing water, you've put too much water in. So it just needs to be really nice and evenly moist, and you want that seed to be surrounded with moist soil. It's just a good start.
Okay. Do you ever fertilize them while they're in the containers before you put them in the ground?
No, I normally don't. I normally wait until they go into the ground and then I fertilize, but you could if you wanted to. But I would only fertilize if I already transplanted them. You don't need to fertilize when they're in the container, the greenhouse. Yeah, you won't need to when they're in the greenhouse. You probably won't even need to if you put them in smaller pots. But once I put them in the ground, then I will fertilize. That's the time to do it.
Okay. Would lettuce be a reliable vegetable for children to start? So this is something where you really want them to succeed. What's a good vegetable to use?
Lettuce is fabulous. Yeah, lettuce is a really good one. A lot of it is going to depend upon the seeds that you get. You want to make sure that your seeds germinate. I think kale would be great for kids. Swiss chard would be good. Beans are so easy. Well, anything in the cucumber, the squash, pumpkin family, those are very easy to grow, and they grow really, really fast. Grow very fast. So yeah, kids would love this, using this method to grow seeds. As a matter of fact, we've, as master gardeners, we've actually have taught this class to junior master gardeners and gone into grade schools and have taught this before COVID.
And our last question of the evening, what seed, yeah, we made it. What seeds have the best success rate for winter sowing?
Well, that's kind of a tough question to
or maybe what seeds have you had the best success with?
Well, as a matter of fact, if when you take a look at your handout, at least for perennials, I've given you a list of perennials that I frequently sow from seed. That will be helpful. I'm also providing you with a handout with vegetables that are really successful to grow, both cool and warm seasons. And it just is gonna. I have really good luck with burpee seeds. Where you can buy burpee seeds at Menards, at Target, at the groceries. Some of the grocery stores have. I have very, very good luck with burpee seeds. I really like shopping local. That's where I love burpee seeds. And I also go to Bachman's and really look through some of their unusual seeds too. They have that. That's where I'll get some of my unusual seeds from. So, yep.
Right. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you everyone for sending in thank yous. We appreciate it.
Yes, and goodbye. I wish all of you luck with this method of growing seeds. It's so fun and so exciting, and my best wishes from me to you. So good luck.
Thank you.